Those words come from the book of Esther. They say, for the Jews of old, there was joy, and there was light, and there was laughter. As it was for them, so may it be for us. When I was in college, sometime in March or February, this secret code would appear on the sidewalks. The Chabadniks would go out in the middle of the night, and they would write in chalk on the sidewalks, "Be happy, it's Adar." The Hebrew month of Adar is supposed to be the happiest month of the year. It's the month that contains Purim, and I imagine it was very confusing for the non-Jews who walked across campus and saw all over the place, "Be happy, it's Adar." But for me, it was always joyful to be reminded that it was this month of happiness. So tonight is Rosh Chodesh Adar, the very beginning of the month of Adar, and we are trying to go up in happiness. As aware as we are of the pain in the world and the hardship in our lives, we are also aware that just as there was joy and happiness for our ancestors before us, there is happiness for us too. And we are going to try and live and pray into that happiness tonight. We are welcoming you, whether you are in the room or joining us online. If you're watching online, we hope you'll take a minute and introduce yourselves in the chat so we know who is with us. If you click on that little gear next to the submit button on our website, you can change your username, and then we'll really know who's with us. And we are particularly feeling the joy to get to celebrate with Emerson and Marin and their families as they become Benot Mitzvah on this Shabbat. And that rite of passage, that celebration for our community is something that brings joy into your family's lives, but into our whole community's life as well. So with that in mind, we are going to invite up Marin and Emerson and their parents to lead us in the lighting of the candles, which begins on page 3.
Don't mess it up, guys. We begin with reading.
As these Shabbat candles give light to all who behold them, so may we be our lives give light to all who behold us.
As their brightness reminds us of the generations of Israel who have kindled light, so may we, in our own day, be among those who kindle light.
O source of light and truth, creator of the eternal law of goodness, help us to find knowledge by which to live. Lead us to take the words we shall speak into our hearts and our lives.
Bless all who enter this sanctuary in need, all who bring the offerings of their hearts. May our worship lead us to acts of kindness, peace, and love.
Now we light the candles. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu le'hadlik ner shel Shabbat. Mazel tov, you may return to your seats. We welcome Shabbat with psalms, and this Psalm 96 has these words that feel very fitting for Adar, that the fields and everything in them shall exult, that they and the trees in the forest shall shout for joy. Ya alo sadai bechol asher bo, ya alo sadai, ay 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 ay, ya alo sadai bechol asher bo, ya alo sadai, ay 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 ay, az yiraninu kol hatzei, az yiraninu kol hatzei, az yiraninu kol hatzei, az yiraninu kol hatzei, ya alo sadai bechol asher bo, ya alo sadai, ay 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 ay, ya alo sadai bechol asher bo, ya alo sadai, ay 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 ay, az yiraninu kol hatzei, az yiraninu kol hatzei, az yiraninu kol hatzei, az yiraninu kol hatzei, alo sadai bechol asher bo, ya alo sadai, ay 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 ay, ya alo sadai bechol asher bo, ya alo sadai, ay 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 ay. And then we welcome Shabbat some more with Lecha Dodi, which can be found on page 20. Keep the joy going. Lecha Dodi, mikrat halah, שמור וזכור בדיבור אחד, כי השמיענו אל המיוחד, אדוני אחד ושמו אחד, לשמו תפארת ולתהילה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה. לקראת שבת מכוון אל חג, כי מקור הברכה, מראש מקדם הניסוחה, סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה. התעוררי, התעוררי, כי בעורף קומי אורי, אורי אורי שיר דברי, כבוד אדוני עלייך נגלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה. We now rise and we face the entrance of the room as we welcome in the Shabbat bride. And then once we get back to that upbeat chorus, we'll turn back around to be together. בואי ושלום עטרת בלה, גם בשמחה ובצהלה, תוך אמוני עם סגולה. בואי חלה, בואי חלה, לך דודי לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה.
We continue with Baruch Hu on page 28. And now a blessing for the beauty of the evening.
Amari Varavi.
Pray with me in the English at the middle of the page, 32. Everlasting love you offered your people Israel by teaching us Torah and mitzvot, laws and precepts. Therefore, Adonai, our God, when we lie down and when we rise up, we will meditate on your laws and your commandments. We will rejoice in your Torah forever. Day and night we will reflect on them, for they are our life, and doing them lengthens our days. Never remove your love from us. Praise to you, Adonai, who loves your people Israel. Baruch atah Adonai, ohev amo Yisrael.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Vaed. You may
Seated as we invite up Marin to lead us in the Vehafta on page 36.
Oh, I think Emerson's leading Vehafta.
What? Okay, Emerson's leading it?
Our cue sheet was wrong. It's
My
okay.
cue sheet is wrong. Marin, we'll get you in a minute, I promise. Okay. You'll do Vehafta tomorrow. It'll be good. All right. Emerson, will you please lead us in Vehafta on page 36? Thank you. You can take your mask off.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך וחיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, וחיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
Yasher Koach, thank you. We continue singing the English words on page 39.
Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught. Forever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it's eternal Egypt. That there's a better place, a promised land, and the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness. That there's no way to get from here to there except by joining hands and marching together, singing
As we were thinking about how to plan a service for Rosh Chodesh Adar, a service for the first night of this joyous month of Adar, I was remembering this poem that lives in the back of my brain somewhere by Ella Wheeler Wilcox that starts with the words, "Laugh and the world laughs with you, weep and you weep alone. For the sad old earth must borrow its mirth, but has trouble enough of its own. Sing and the hills will answer, sigh, it is lost on the air. The echoes bound to a joyful sound, but shrink from voicing care." And I had put the whole poem in the cue sheet, and then I realized it's not a terribly Jewish poem. This idea that, like, if you laugh, the world will laugh with you, but if you cry, you're all alone. Certainly that's how our pain can sometimes feel, like we are all alone. But what I think is unique about Judaism is that we can feel both of those emotions, and we can actually feel them together and validate both of them at the same time. The Jewish author Saul Bellow has a quote that I love, that Jewish life is the curious commingling of laughter and weeping. And I think that Purim is a great example of that, this holiday that is a story about a planned genocide that didn't happen, but also the only book of the Bible that is written as satire, that is written to be humorous, that is written to be laughed at. We're going to talk about this serious subject, but we're also going to laugh in its face. And I think that laughter, unlike what Wilcox says, is a necessary part of our weeping, and weeping is a necessary part of our laughter. And that Shabbat gives us the spaciousness to be able to feel all of those emotions, from laughter through weeping and hopefully back again. So we join now together in the words of Yismechu. Those who keep in Shabbat will call it a delight and will rejoice in God's realm, an opportunity to embrace all of the emotions of our lives and to laugh our way through them.
Shabbat.
Okay, now I invite up Maren to lead.
Now.
Okay, great. Now I invite, she was so ready to do the Ve'afta. She's like, Ve'afta, I'm good. But now you're going to come up and you're going to lead us in the Amidah, which begins on page 46, and we'll invite everyone to please rise. And you can take off your mask. Oh, you did. Okay.
Adonai, Sivatev Tifta'u Fia Gitehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu, Ve'Elohei Avotenu V'Imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzhak, Ve'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rahel, Ve'Elohei Leah. Ha-El Hagadol Hagibor V'Hanara El Elyon Gomel Hasadim Tovim V'Konei Hakol V'Zoher Hasevovi Mahot Umevigil Alavnei V'Nehem Leman Shemo V'Ahava Mele Ozer Umoshia Umogei Baruch Atah Adonai Magen Avraham V'Zrat Sarah Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai Mehaye Hakol Atzara V'Yoshia Mashiv Harua Umarid Haga Hashem Mehakel Hayim Behesed Mehaye Hakol Berachamim Ramim Somen Noflim Verofei Holim Umatir Asarim Umakayem Imunato Lishanei Afar Michamo Chapa Kevirot Umido Mela Melememit Umahaye Umatmiya Yeshua Menamanata L'Chayot Hakol Baruch Atah Adonai Mehaye Hakol Atah Kadosh V'Shim HaKadosh Ukedoshim B'Hoyam Yahalelu Hasela Baruch Atah Adonai Ha'el HaKadosh.
Asher Koach, thank you. You may be seated, first of all. In the middle of the Amidah is a prayer for gratitude for the blessings in our lives. In Judaism, we call God by a great many names. And for our Modim prayer, our gratitude prayer this evening, I want to share with you a poem that contains one of my favorite names for God. It's not by a Jewish author, but I think it's a very Jewish name for God. The poet Thomas Lux calls God the Joy Bringer. The joy bringer breaks the light through the oak leaves at dawn. The joy bringer interjects the red bird's red. The joy bringer brings the green, lets the cup runneth over into a saucer from which you can sip. Gives fish the river and the river the fish. If by 2 inches you avoid a piano falling on your head, and later at the hospital fall in love with a doctor who removes a few splinters of ivory and black piano lacquer from your left calf, the joy bringer arranged that. Also, the chilled artesian water spilling from a pipe only 2 inches above the ground, from which you drank on your hands and knees on a few boards or branches. You bowed in the muck and drank that sweet cold reaching up. You drank among the skunk cabbage ferns, a small brook at your back. And guess what? The joy bringer. In fact, let us praise the joy bringer for these 7 things: right lung, left lung, heart, left brain, right brain, tongue, the body to put them in. Thank you, joy bringer. And thank you too for just mown hay, cut an inch from its roots to bleed its perfume into the air. Baruch atah Adonai, hatov shimcha ulecha na'eh lehodot. Take a moment now to pray for peace. If we need God to be a joy bringer, God needs us to be peace bringers. Shalom Rav, page 60.
Shalom Rav, Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav, Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Leolam. we take a moment now for silent prayer. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable to you, Adonai, my rock and my redeemer. Yiratson imrefi behegyon libi lefanecha. Adonai tzuri begoali. Adonai tzuri begoali.
We turn our prayerful attention now to those who are in need of healing, who are in need of strength. We pray that they will have a refuah shlema, a return to complete wholeness, whatever that wholeness looks like. We think of those who struggle with the pains we see and the pains that we can never know, chronic pain and chronic illness. Think of those in our lives struggling with addiction and those in recovery. Think of all the people throughout the world who are in need of healing and strength at this moment, and we hope that our prayers can offer them some. In our community, we are praying for Marcia Block and Bradley Borden, Nora Brown, Shirley Burkham, Melba Berman, Miles Cohn, Shepard Harris, Jerry Hooks, Richard Jackson, Sam Jacobson, Sarah James, Don Joachim, Lawrence Levy, Barbara Naples, Scott Newberger, Bree Pugh, Arthur Raymond Ribbon, Gail Rockoff, Edward Simmons, Melinda Scholar, Robert Braitman Smith, Mervat Tadrouse, Marcia Tushita, Roger Williams, David Ben Root, Gelka Nechama Bat Leba Chaya, Leah Fruma, Meira Shifra Bat Shmuel Vitziva, and Talia Leah Bat Baracha Shana Ruvain HaKohen, and all who are suffering with physical illness, emotional distress and pain, and those who are battling COVID-19. We offer this prayer of Misha Beirach on page 253.
Misha Beirach Avotenu Mekor HaBracha Limotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen.
Two brief announcements for this Shabbat. Our classics group, for those in their 50s and 60s, will have a post-Shabbat program to visit and talk about all things travel next Friday at 7:30 p.m. We invite you to please register online. And also, we want to tell you that as of next week, our plan, if all goes according to plan with the numbers in Houston, is to move back to phase 3 of our reopening schedule, our reopening plan, before Shabbat's worship next week. If you're interested in attending Shabbat worship here in the Barish Sanctuary on Friday nights, pre-registration is required through our website for a very limited capacity, and we will offer with a deadline of the Thursday evening prior to that Friday. So we invite you to sign up online if you'd like to join us here in the Barish Sanctuary. Any additional updates will continue to be shared on our website and with the congregation. Later this year, the Reform Movement's publishing house, the CCAR Press, will release a new social justice Torah commentary. I was approached by the editor, Rabbi Barry Block, to co-author the article on this week's Torah portion, along with my friend and classmate, Rabbi Emily Langowitz. Our parsha, Mishpatim, contains numerous laws that provide a basis for our Jewish understanding of justice. But there is one commandment that stood out, which Rabbi Block hoped we would write. A small segment of verses from Mishpatim serve as the foundation for the Jewish understandings of the issues surrounding abortion. Rabbi Langowitz was approached because her rabbinical school thesis was on new Jewish theologies of reproductive choice. Rabbi Block came to me because he had heard a sermon I gave here in 2018 explaining my lifelong commitment to choice. Rabbi Langowitz and I were excited to collaborate, and I am honored that our work will appear in this important book for our movement and the Jewish world. In our studies and preparations, I came to understand a certain discomfort I had felt for a long time, but which I had not previously found words to express. I had often used the text from Mishpatim to teach that Jewish tradition permits or indeed even requires abortion in a case where a mother's life is threatened. I had used the rabbinic text that build on those biblical verses to explain the Jewish view that life does not fully begin until birth, and that while the life of the fetus is valued, the mother's life always takes precedence. But I have come to feel that these texts are also insufficient. Before I went to rabbinical school, I worked as an organizer at an interfaith pro-choice advocacy organization called the Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice. There was a phrase that I heard activists use in that work. It was coined by Bill Clinton, who said that abortion should be legal, safe, and rare. This phrase was, for a time, a rallying cry of pro-choice advocates that united disparate groups in the movement. But already by the time I was at RCRC in the mid-2000s, it was falling out of use. And I think perhaps for the same reason that I was growing dissatisfied with the Jewish texts I had inherited on this topic. Both implied that abortion was permissible, but also framed it as morally unfortunate. Both Bill Clinton's phrase and the Jewish texts I've been teaching treat abortion as a necessary evil. They prescribe abortion rights while contributing to the stigmatization of the procedure. But here's the thing. Abortion is not rare. 1 in 4 Americans who can get pregnant will terminate a pregnancy by the age of 45. These traditions that call us to understand abortion as something that can or should only happen in the rarest cases ignore the reality that every one of our family's stories has been touched by this topic. And so I have been searching for Jewish frameworks to understand this issue that are more expansive, more compassionate, more loving. I want to open up discussions about reproductive choice that affirm our power as moral decision makers, that see the ability to make choices as a reflection of the divine. I want a theology of choice that looks at our best faith efforts to make the right choice for us, for future generations, for our families and our world, and lifts those choices up instead of diminishing them. I want a theology of choice that takes us beyond a discussion about permissibility into a realm of sacred stories. And I hope our article is one step in that direction. If you are interested in exploring the texts that serve as the starting place for this conversation, I invite you to join Rabbi Silk and me for Gems of Torah tomorrow morning at 9:15, where we will be digging into them more deeply. And it is my hope that this Shabbat will be a part of an ongoing conversation. What I have come to be able to articulate through my study with Rabbi Langowitz is that these texts are necessary but insufficient. They are a starting place, but the conversation cannot end there. With that in mind, I want to share with you for the first time publicly an adapted version of the article we wrote, which is called Stricken from the Text, Mishpatim and Sacred Stories of Reproductive Justice. In 1952, my grandmother Audrey would have been about 20 years old. Recently married, she and her husband were planning to begin having children in a few years after he graduated from college in Connecticut. But as the Yiddish proverb says, people plan and God laughs. Audrey soon became pregnant. A few weeks later, however, the joyous laughter was drained from this pregnancy when she contracted German measles. Her doctor warned her that the fetus was at great risk for congenital rubella syndrome, and that even if it survived to term, it would likely suffer severe birth defects. The doctor and all of his colleagues urged her to seek an abortion, though such a procedure was illegal. Audrey and her husband were young, scared, and far away from their family support system as they struggled with what to do. And yet they were also lucky to have means and connections. Someone recommended they travel to see a friendly doctor in Boston who helped them find certainty. Even almost 70 years later, Audrey can still hear him saying, "If you were my daughter, I would not let you carry this pregnancy to term." He admitted her to the hospital and wrote on her chart that she had come for a D&C after a miscarriage to hide their illegal act. Audrey remembers at the time being terrified of the procedure itself, of the illegality of it, and mostly of the thought that she might never be able to have children afterwards. Yet now, looking back, she remarks that she has never once regretted her decision. She did what she knew was right for her. She consulted her doctor, her husband, her God, and she made her responsible choice. A study by the Pew Research Center found that 83% of American Jews say that abortion should be legal in all or most cases. American Jews' widespread support for permissive abortion laws finds grounding in the Jewish tradition's approach to pregnancy and its end. Though the Torah makes no specific reference to any process resembling a modern abortion, the following passage from Parshat Mishpatim provides our tradition's earliest guidance on the termination of a pregnancy. It says, "When two or more parties fight and one of them pushes a pregnant woman and a miscarriage results, but no other damage ensues, the one responsible shall be fined according to the woman's husband may exact, the payment to be based on reckoning. But if other damage ensues, the penalty shall be a life for a life, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, hand for a hand," and so on. The passage contrasts two scenarios in which two men are fighting and accidentally strike a nearby pregnant woman. The permutations differ only in who or what is harmed. In the first, only the fetus is lost, and the punishment is a monetary fine. In the second, the woman herself is harmed or killed. There, the punishment is retributive, an eye for an eye, nefesh, literally soul, but in this case meaning a human life possessing personhood, for a nefesh. From this, we may derive the principle that a woman has the full status of person, nefesh, while the fetus, though valued, has a lesser status. The Mishnah expands this understanding of differential value by stating that if a woman's life is threatened in childbirth, the fetus inside her can be destroyed, even to the point of, quote, taking it out limb from limb, for her life comes before the fetus's life. Through this graphic language of the text, the Mishnaic author leaves no ambiguity as to whose life takes precedence. This text sets the standard from which other halakha or Jewish law on abortion flows. Later commentators debate in great detail the implications of this text, particularly the breadth or narrowness of the definition of a threat to a life of a woman. Some are more permissive of a range of emotional as well as physical impacts that could justify an abortion, while others understand the instances of permissibility with excruciating parsimony. Still, from the outset, Judaism can imagine some instances where an abortion would be permitted and even required. Furthermore, the Gemara concludes that prior to 40 days, a fetus is not a person, but rather considered mere water. The debates about abortion in America hinge on a question related to what constitutes personhood and when life begins. But these are religious and spiritual questions about which people of faith and conviction can disagree. The Supreme Court held in Roe v. Wade that abortion is protected under the Constitution's Fourth Amendment, which guarantees a right to privacy, including a right to private medical procedures. For American Jews, the protection of access to abortion could also be understood under the First Amendment's Free Exercise of Religion Clause. Because Jewish law permits abortion under certain circumstances as morally acceptable, or even in some cases a halachic requirement, any law that limits a woman's right to choose might limit a Jewish woman's ability to make decisions in accordance with her religious beliefs. When people of faith seek to adopt laws asserting when life begins, they endeavor to enshrine their own religious understandings into law. In civic discourse, the fact that Judaism understands these issues differently can be a powerful antidote to the pervasive sense that religious voices are only to be found on one side of this debate. Judaism is unequivocally pro-life, in that it values life in all forms, both actualized and potential. But where that term has come to mean anti-abortion, then it is clear that Judaism allows for abortion under at least some circumstances, and therefore calls us to advocate for civil laws that protect a woman's right to access abortion services. These texts and their subsequent interpretations are a vital resource for all of us who seek to affirm Jewish support for choice. And yet, we are called to go further. The law is only one facet of a full and holistic justice. Even as Parshat Mishpatim guides us to a pro-choice-oriented understanding of abortion law, it also leaves us with an injustice of a silenced story. The text in Exodus 21 begins with an act of violence perpetrated against a pregnant woman. And yet this woman is all but absent from subsequent conversations about the passage. Across the centuries, almost all of the voices of Jewish interpretation and even many modern commentators fail to acknowledge her story. The interpreters miss the opportunity to see her as subject rather than object. To see the woman in this text as merely a hypothetical in a legal case is to deny that cases such as these were very real to the people who experienced them. To reach a full sense of justice in our understanding of abortion, we must pair Mishpatim, laws, with Sipurim, stories. We cannot go back in time and ask this woman how she experienced the day her pregnancy ended so abruptly. But Judaism gives us plenty of precedent to offer this woman and all those who live through challenging or stigmatized reproductive experiences the power of our curiosity and our questions. How might we ask this text something new? What might we gain by looking into it not just for legal precedent but for narrative as well? Discussions of abortion so often center on the personhood of the fetus. This approach allows us to elevate the personhood of the one carrying the pregnancy. To achieve the justice owed this woman hearing the truth of her story, we might ask her, who are you? What was your name and your life story? What circumstances brought you into such close proximity with this fight? If you survive, what will you tell your other children about the day you lost your pregnancy? What was your relationship to the pregnancy you carried, and what value did you assign to its loss? Our tradition offers techniques we can employ to reveal the answers. First, we can look for parallel texts within the Torah to give this woman's story greater context. There's a nearly identical case of two men fighting near a woman in Deuteronomy 25. In that episode, a woman attempts to break up a fight between her husband and another man. In the process, she accidentally touches the other man and is sentenced to having the offending hand cut off. The woman of our verse in Mishpatim might well have known of such punishment. Picture the terror she would have felt, knowing that any action she took could end in violence. If she chose to intervene or not, if she knew the men or not, in any scenario she risks losing her hand, her pregnancy, or even her life. Even in the 21st century, we live in a society in which pregnant women find their choices restricted by the violence of the men around them. When we read these passages from Exodus and Deuteronomy in tandem, we see beyond the permission for reproductive choice to the structures in society that must be healed to make such choices real. A second way to give the woman of Mishpatim greater voice and agency is to turn to Midrash. No traditional Midrash gives greater insight into this woman's story, and so we are called to create our own. We might be aided in this endeavor by a final technique for bringing fuller justice to this narrative. We can ask this woman of the Torah for the truth. We cannot ask this woman of the Torah for the truth of her experience, but we can come to a better understanding of it by asking those in the present day whose own stories could help uncover that which is hidden in this text. Every family has stories of reproductive choices. Some are shared between mothers and daughters, between parents and children. Others are kept secret and lost. Our work of justice is rooted in the telling of these stories. For every woman caught in a fight between two men, there was one miscarrying at home and one in a strange land, one in a happy marriage and one whose relationship was violent, one alone and one surrounded by her family, one desperately wanting to save the fetus and one desperately wanting it gone. Every pregnancy has its own story with its own ending. Each time we listen with compassion and curiosity to a new narrative, we strengthen our ability to discuss pregnancy and its termination without judgment, guided by the voices of those who have actually experienced it. Sharing these stories has the power to lift up marginalized voices and create public empathy and awareness. For me, as an activist and advocate, these stories I read alongside our ancient texts, and which I view as equally sacred, inspire my passion for justice. Telling my grandmother's story compels me to work towards a world in which abortion might be legal, accessible, and destigmatized. Justice for all who carry such stories, whether spoken or unspoken, must be reflected in our laws and our culture. This text in Mishpatim gives us a blueprint for those laws. The personal narrative it omits calls us towards creating a more just culture, one in which we see the humanity of all those who choose to end a pregnancy. Shabbat Shalom. We continue now with Aleinu, which is found on page 282. I invite you to rise as the ark is opened.
Aleinu leshabeach ladon hakol, latet gedula liotzer breshit, shelo asanu kegoye ha'aratzot, velo samanu kemishpechot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkeinu kahem, vigor aleinu kechol hamonam. אנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום
Please be seated. Our thoughts turn to those who have departed this earth, our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, and those of every race and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, life and death. We take a few moments now for silent memory. We think of our loved ones whom death has recently taken from us, those who have died at this season in years past, and those whom we have drawn into our hearts with our own, Zichronam Livracha, may their memories be for a blessing. On this Shabbat, our hearts go out in sympathy to the families of Al Engel, Estelle Jucker, Trevor Mark Matthews, and Aaron Schneider, who were laid to rest in recent days. We also recall the yard sites of Bert Agronowitz, Clara Asher, Catherine Bauer, Roberta Bernstein, Eleanor E. Blum, Joseph Borden, Marion Cohn Botas, Robert L. Brenner, Barbara Strauss Buck, Philip Burkham, Louis Chellin, Linda Wolfe Cohen, Shirley Cowan, Mark Cypress, Leonard Daly, Ernest DeLeaf, Irene Dorn, Dr. H.B. Eisenstadt, Aaron I. Feldman, Jeannie Feldman, Sarah Felt, Rosalie Ann Fink, William Flaxman, Michael Forsmith, Sylvia Will Fradkin, Frida Freeman, Isidore Galperin, Faye Gelfond, Naomi Golan, Reba Schultz Goldberg, Dorothy Lee Goldstein, Karen Ruth Goodman, Merle Mickey Granoff, Harry Green, Alan Greenberg, Estelle Grossman, Gerald Harris, Sandra Harris, Henriette Dobrinsky Herzog, Carl M. Hess, Shirley Hoffman, Frances Hoffman, Velia Kaplan, Benson Kaplan, Julius Karp, Rose Keeper, Frida Kleiman, Dorothy L. Klein, Max Klinger, Kelly Lynn Kogan, Galina Kukis, Jacob Laser, Myrtle Lebo, Hannah Linsky, Eleanor Levine, Harry Levine, Nathan Lewis, Eugene Light, Faith G. Lipkin, Lee Lipman, Frida Hochstein Mendelovitz, Michael Myers, Ernie Meyerson, Latrice Joy Rosen Miller, Irving Nadler, Sarah Knight, Louis Natishan, Emmanuel Nuremberg, Lupe Orozco, Evelyn Lyons Palmer, Deborah Yvonne Parvin, Leslie Michael Ribnick, Harold Ruth, Albert Rose, Arnold Leonard Roseman, Jeanette Rosen, Morris Rosen, Erna Rosenthal, Goldie Raymond Rosner, Irving Ross, Lucille Saknowitz, Robert Schenberg, Morris Schultz, Bessie Abramson Schwartz, Sarah Elaine Schonhoff, Natalie Schultz, Dr. Fred Siegel, Holly Harwood Skolkin, Saul Smolens, Rose Solowitz, Pete Spear, Albert Stein, Layla Tanner, Simon Ute, Stanley Wadler, Maxine Weinstein, Sidonia Weiss, Arthur B. Westerman, Molly Markowitz Wilkenfeld, Luba Weiss, Corinne Wolf, David Woloski, David Kevin Zimmerman. We rise for the words of Kaddish on page 294. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, be'alma divrachu te v'al michma chute, b'chayechon v'yomechon uv'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael, ba'gala v'izman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam omei hamaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitchomam v'yitnaseh. V'yithadar v'yithaleh v'yithalal shmei dikudsha brichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'ne'emata. Tamiram be'ama v'imru amen. Yehei shlama Rabbah min shemaya. V'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Osei shalom b'mromav. Hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. V'imru. Amen.
Osei shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru. Amen. We move from Kaddish to Kiddush, and we invite Marin and her parents and Emerson and your parents to lead us in Kiddush and Motzi. So you're going to hold your Kiddush cup and stand near the microphone. Ready? Baruch
Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kishanu b'mitzvotav, v'ratzavanu, v'shabbat kodsho b'ahava u'ratzon, infilanu, zikaron l'maaseh bereshit, ki hu yom tehillah l'mikraye kodesh, zecher l'tziat Mitzrayim, ki banu baharta, ve'otanu kidashta, mikol ha'amim, ve'shabbat koshecha, be'ahava u'ratzon, hihaltanu, Baruch atah Adonai, mekadesh ha-shabbat.
L'chaim, and you can take a sip and then uncover the challah. Ready for the motzi? Here we go. Baruch atah Adonai,
Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen.
Thank you, and you can return to your seats. We close this evening with these words we began with, that the Jews enjoyed light and gladness, happiness and honor, and so may it be for us. La Yehudi, hayta ora, ve'simcha ve'sason, La Yehudi, hayta ora, ve'simcha
Joy bringer. There was light and joy and laughter for the Jews of old. May there be light and joy and laughter for us. May we revel in the sacred stories that we hear from our ancestors, from each other, that we share with our children. May we be sources of joy in this world. May we know the beauty that comes when joy and laughter commingle with weeping and wholeness. May we find peace. May we be grateful for all the many blessings that you bring us, O joy bringer, as we say together, Amen.
Amen.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.